The dust storm in the Velran outer belt had been raging for 9 days when the survey ship Quiet Drift slipped through its eastern edge. The ship was small, painted pale blue, and built for science work, not war. It carried a crew of 6 and one very nervous scanner officer named Tylan, who had not slept properly since the storm began. Tylan sat in the cramped sensor pit at the back of the bridge. His 4 eyes were fixed on the long black screen in front of him. Lines of soft green data scrolled past, slow and steady. Outside the hull, the storm had finally begun to thin. Bits of rock and frozen gas drifted past the viewport like quiet snow. He saw the contact at 0400 ship time. It was a single dot on the edge of his screen. Cold, not moving, too big to be a rock, too quiet to be a ship. Tylan blinked. He cleaned the screen with the side of his sleeve. The dot was still there. He ran the scan again, then a third time. Each time, the dot stayed exactly where it was, drifting in a slow, lazy spin against the dark. He called the captain. Captain Oren arrived on the bridge 4 minutes later, still pulling on his uniform jacket. He was a tall, thin officer with patient eyes and a voice that never rose. He stood behind Tylan and looked at the screen for a long time before saying anything. "What is it?" he finally asked. "I do not know," Tylan said. "It reads like a ship, but the heat signature is wrong, the shape is wrong, and it is not on any registry we carry." "Could be a wreck." "Could be," Tylan said, "but wrecks do not have warm reactors. This one is warm, just barely, like someone left a kettle on in the next room." Oren was quiet for a long moment. Then he ordered a slow approach. The Quiet Drift turned in the dark and began to creep forward. The ship's engines were small and gentle, built for science, not chase. The bridge crew watched in silence as the dot on the screen grew larger and slowly took shape. For a long time it was only a smudge, then a line, then an outline. Then they saw it properly, and the bridge went very quiet. The thing was huge, not big in the way warships were big in the way mountains were big. It hung in the dark like a long, scarred blade. Its hull was layered in heavy plates, dark gray on dark gray, patched in some places with rough metal that did not match the rest. Long scrapes ran down its sides like claw marks from something enormous. The front of the ship narrowed to a sharp point. The back was a forest of engines, all cold, all silent. Tylan ran the threat assessment. The system thought about it for 9 seconds. That was strange. The system never thought for 9 seconds. Then a single line of red text appeared on the screen. Classification: Class III-DATHWORLD vessel. Tylan stared at the words. He had read about the Class III rating once, years ago, in a thick old book during training. The rating was theoretical. It was the category the Concordat kept on its books for warships built by species that came from planets too violent for civilized life. Worlds with crushing gravity. Worlds with predators the size of buildings. Worlds where the air itself could kill you on a bad afternoon. No Class III species had ever been found. The category was a thought experiment, a warning written by old officers who wanted to imagine the worst. "That cannot be right," Tylan whispered. "Run it again." He ran it again. The system gave the same answer. "Captain," he said. Oren was already reading over his shoulder. The captain's face had gone very still. He did not speak for a while. He just looked at the long, scarred shape on the main viewport and breathed slowly through his nose. "Are we sure it is a real ship?" Oren asked at last. "Not a prop, not a mock-up some pirate is using to scare people." "The reactor is real," Tylan said. "The hull metal is real. The mass is real. Whatever it is, it was built by hands that knew what they were doing." Oren walked back to the captain's chair. He sat down slowly, he thought. The right thing to do was to back away. Mark the contact. Send a long-range message to the Concordat and let the Navy come in with a real warship. The wrong thing to do was to keep approaching. Oren looked at his small science crew. They were good people. None of them had ever fired a weapon in anger. None of them had been trained for anything like this. He should have turned the ship around. But Oren was also a man who had spent his whole life looking at things and asking why. He had become a captain because the universe was full of strange, quiet objects, and someone had to go and look at them. He did not turn the ship around. "Take us closer," he said softly. "Slow, lights on full, no weapons hot. We are a science ship and we want them to know it." The quiet drift crept forward. The big dark vessel grew larger in the viewport until it filled half the sky. The crew did not speak. They could hear the soft hum of their own life support and the quiet breathing of the person next to them. When they were close enough to count the scratches on the hull, the big ship pulsed once. A single low wave of energy, soft and patient, like something old and very tired turning its head in the dark to look at them. Tylen's hands shook on his console. The big ship did nothing else, it just watched. 3 hours after the contact pulsed at them, the boarding shuttle dropped out of the quiet drift's underbelly. It was a small fat craft, built more for hauling soil samples than soldiers, and the 5 people inside it sat in tight metal chairs and tried not to look nervous. Halen sat at the front. He was the senior diplomatic officer attached to the survey, a calm, soft-spoken man with dark blue skin and gentle hands. He had spent his whole career talking to strangers. He had never once expected those strangers to come from a Class III hull. Behind him sat 2 soldiers from the Concordat security branch, both young, both holding their rifles a little too tightly. Beside them was a medic named Pell, a quiet woman who carried a heavy field kit and a small, worried smile. At the back was Mersa, the survey ship's engineer, a short, broad-shouldered person with a tool belt full of strange instruments and a habit of muttering at machinery as if it could hear her. The shuttle drifted toward the great dark vessel slowly. As they neared its side, a wide rectangle of light appeared on the hull, a door. It opened by itself, smooth and silent, and a soft yellow glow spilled out into space. "They are inviting us in," Halen said quietly. "That is one way to read it," Mersa muttered. The shuttle slid through the open hatch and settled gently inside a wide hangar. The outer door closed behind them. Air hissed in around the shuttle. A small green light came on above the inner door, a universal sign across many species that meant safe to breathe. The boarding team stepped out. The first thing that hit them was the gravity. It was heavy, not crushing but heavy enough that Halen felt it in his knees within 5 steps. Pell, who was small, stumbled and had to catch herself on the wall. The 2 soldiers grunted and adjusted their stance. Only Mersa seemed barely bothered because Mersa was built like a stone wall. "This is twice standard at least," Pell whispered. "More," Mersa said. She had pulled out a small handheld scanner. 2 1/4. They live like this all day. The hangar was clean. There was no rust, no dust, no signs of long abandonment. A row of empty cradles stood along one wall, big enough to hold smaller fighters. Tools hung on racks. A pair of soft-work gloves sat folded on a bench, as if someone had set them down for a moment and meant to come back. Halen led the team out of the hangar through a wide corridor. The walls were dark gray metal. The lights along the ceiling were low and warm. The air was a little thick, a little humid, and smelled faintly of something the boarding team could not name. Not chemicals, something almost alive. There were marks on the walls. Mersa noticed them first, long scratches at about chest height, running for several meters along one corridor. They were too straight to be accidents, too rough to be writing in any neat sense. "Someone made these on purpose," she said, running her fingers along one. "Old, years old. They put them here so they could feel their way along this corridor in the dark." "Why would they need to do that?" Pell asked. "Because at some point," Mersa said, "the lights went out for a long time and they did not want anyone to get lost." Halen felt a cold thing crawl up his spine. They kept walking. The corridor opened into a wider space, a kind of common room. There were chairs bolted to the floor, a long, low table. Half-finished mugs sat on it, their contents long dried. A board on the wall had small marks scratched into it, lines and tally counts like someone had been keeping score of something. In the corner of the room, in a soft padded cradle that hung from the ceiling on heavy springs, lay a sleeping figure. The boarding team froze. The figure was tall, long-limbed. It had soft, pale skin without scales or plating. Its hair was dark and short. Its hands were tucked under its chin in the way a child sleeps. It was breathing slowly and evenly, deep, relaxed breaths. It did not look dangerous. It looked tired. It looked, Halen thought, almost fragile, like one of his own children when they had played too long in the garden and fallen asleep in the grass. Pell took a small step forward, the medic in her speaking before the diplomat in Halen could stop her. "It is asleep," she whispered. "Just sleeping. Look at the breath rate." "Do not wake it," one of the soldiers hissed. "I was not going to," Pell whispered back. Halen stared at the sleeping figure. His mind tried to fit it into the ship around it. The heavy gravity, the patched hull, the Class III rating. None of it matched this soft sleeping creature with its hands tucked under its chin. He was so busy trying to fit the pieces together that he did not hear the footsteps behind them until they were already close. "Welcome aboard," a voice said. It was calm. It was tired. It spoke the Concordat trade tongue with only a faint accent. It came from behind them, from a doorway they had passed without checking. The boarding team turned as one. Standing in the doorway was another of the soft-skinned figures. This one was awake, older, gray streaked through dark hair tied back in a simple knot, steady eyes that did not blink as much as Halen expected. She wore a plain dark uniform with no badges of rank. She held 2 cups of something warm in her hands. "You must be tired," she said gently. "Please come and sit." Halen had read every diplomatic guidebook the Concordat had ever published. None of them covered being offered tea by a Class III warship commander. The woman led the boarding team to a small, ready room near the common space. It was warm and quiet. The walls were lined with old paper photographs, real paper, faded at the edges. They showed strange scenes: a blue sky over a wide green field, a small wooden boat on a gray ocean, a child holding a small 4-legged animal in its arms. "Please sit," the woman said. She set the warm cups down on a low table. "I am sorry there are not enough drinks for everyone. I only had 2 hands." She pulled a chair around and sat opposite Halen. The 2 soldiers stayed standing, hands close to their rifles. Pell sat cautiously. Mersa remained in the doorway, arms folded, watching everything. "My name is Adira," the woman said. "I am the acting commander of this ship. We do not get many visitors. I hope you will forgive me if I am slow with the manners." "Halen of the Concordat Survey Service," Halen said carefully. "Thank you for the welcome." Adira nodded. She picked up her cup. She did not drink from it. She just held it in both hands as if for the warmth. "You will have questions," she said. "I will try to answer the ones I can." Halen took a slow breath. He had 1,000 questions. He chose the smallest one first. "How long have you been out here?" "On this ship," Adira thought. 41 of your standard years. On this current patrol, 11 months. 41 years, Pell whispered. On a single ship. "It is a good ship," Adira said simply. "And the others?" Halen asked. "There must be more of you." 19 on board, Adira said. "Most of them are sleeping. We run on a long rotation. 6 awake, the rest in slow rest. It saves food and it keeps people from going strange in the head from too much black sky." Halen leaned forward slowly. The big question was sitting on his tongue. He had been told, over and over in his career, never to ask it first, but he could not wait any longer. "Adira," he said gently, "what species are you?" She smiled. It was a small, tired smile. The kind of smile a teacher gives to a student who has finally asked the right question. "We call ourselves humans," she said. "Our home is a small green and blue world far from your space. You would not have a name for it on your charts. We have always called it Earth." "Humans," Halen said slowly. He tried the word. It did not match anything in any registry he had ever read. "Tell me about your world," he said. Adira sipped her drink at last. She thought for a long moment, the way someone does when they are choosing which part of a long story to tell first. "Our world is beautiful," she said, "and our world is angry. The 2 things have always been true together." She set the cup down. On Earth, the gravity is heavy. Not as heavy as this ship, but enough. The weather changes fast and sometimes it kills people. The oceans have storms that can sink whole cities. The land has mountains that breathe fire. The forests have animals with teeth as long as my hand. The rivers carry small things you cannot see that can make you sick in a single afternoon. She said all this in the same calm voice someone might use to describe the weather. We grew up there, she continued. Not in cities at first, out in the open. We were not the strongest thing on our world. We were not the fastest. We were not the largest. We did not have armor or claws or venom. What we had was each other, and patience, and the strange habit of not giving up when we should have. Mersa in the doorway finally spoke. Your hull, she said. Class III rating. I have been looking at the weld since I came aboard. That is not warship armor. That is just normal building. Yes, Adira said. That is what I cannot understand, Mersa said. If your people are not warlike, why does a normal human ship look like a tomb that learned to fly? Adira's smile got smaller and sadder. Because when human engineers design anything, she said, they imagine the worst day they can think of, and then they build for a day twice as bad. It is a habit we cannot shake. We grew up on a world that punished anyone who built only for the good days, so our bridges hold 10 times what they need to. Our boats float in storms that should sink them. Our ships are wrapped in armor we will probably never need. Probably, one of the soldiers repeated quietly. Adira looked at him with kind eyes. Probably, she agreed. Pell spoke softly. How many ships does your species have out here? Not many, Adira said. Most humans are at home now. We have our own quiet worlds. We are not interested in conquering anyone. The age of empires ended for us long ago, and we did not enjoy it while it lasted. Then why are you out here at all? Halen asked. Adira took another slow sip. Because the galaxy is large, she said, and there are things in it that prey on small kind species. And we decided, a long time ago, that no one we could reach should be eaten alone in the dark. The room went very still. Halen looked at this calm, tired woman holding her warm cup and felt the floor of his understanding shift under his feet. The alarm started while Adira was pouring a second cup. It was not a loud alarm. That was the first thing Halen noticed. On a Concordat ship, an alarm meant flashing red lights and screaming sirens designed to push panic into every sleeping mind. On this ship, the alarm was a single low tone, steady, almost polite. Adira set the kettle down. She tilted her head. She listened for one moment, the way a parent listens to a sound from another room and decides if it is serious. Then she stood up. Excuse me, she said. I will need a minute. She walked to the wall and tapped a small dark panel. It came alive with soft green text. Halen, watching, could not read the language. He did not need to. He could see the shape of it. 3 small dots moving in tight formation, closing on a 4th bigger dot. The 4th dot was the quiet drift. Halen's blood went cold. He pulled his comm from his belt with shaking hands. Captain Oran, he said, this is Halen. Are you seeing contacts? We are seeing contacts, Oran's voice came back very tight. 3 ships, Koran clan markings. They are not answering hails. The Koran were known. They were a clan of raiders who lived in the long broken belts to the spinward of Concordat space. They did not speak to outsiders. They did not take prisoners. They did not leave witnesses. The Concordat had been trying to deal with them for 50 years with patrols and patient diplomacy. Nothing had worked. How long? Halen asked. 6 minutes, Oran said. Maybe 7. We cannot outrun them. We cannot fight them. Halen, I am sorry. I should have turned us around. Halen turned to Adira with desperate eyes. She was already moving. She did not run. She did not raise her voice. She simply walked to the door of the ready room and tapped a different panel. She spoke a few quiet words in her own language. Then she came back. My crew is waking, she said. We will help your ship. Please ask your captain to hold position and keep his weapons cold. The Koran will think you are alone. That is better for what we need to do. You will fight 3 corsairs. one of the soldiers asked. Yes, Adira said. With 19 people. 6 awake right now, she corrected gently. The rest are still sleeping. We will not need them. She said it the way a farmer might say, I will not need the second axe today. The boarding team followed her out of the ready room. The corridors of the human ship were changing. The warm, low lights had shifted to a cooler white. The soft hum of the air system had deepened into something more steady, more alive. Doors opened ahead of Adira as she walked, and people stepped out of them. Halen counted as they passed. A young man with a medical satchel, who Adira called Petros. A short, broad woman with calm eyes who Adira called Bren, and who patted Halen on the shoulder as she passed, gently, the way one pats a nervous animal. A tall, thin man at a navigation console named Devrin. A pilot named Yusra, already strapped into her seat, her hands moving across her controls with the easy speed of long habit. None of them ran. None of them shouted. They moved like people doing the dishes on a quiet evening. Adira led Halen to a small viewing alcove off the bridge. She gestured for him to stay there. Watch if you wish, she said, or close your eyes, whichever is easier. Through the wide window, Halen could see the stars. He could see the small, pale shape of the quiet drift in the distance. And he could see, growing larger, the 3 sharp shapes of the Corin corsairs. The human ship turned. Halen felt the turn in his bones. The huge dark vessel pivoted with a slow, heavy grace, like a sleeping animal lifting its head. The cold engines at the back of the ship lit up one by one. Each one bloomed white and blue and steady. The whole ship gave one long, deep shudder and then settled into a calm forward push. The forward weapons unfolded. They were not what Halen expected. He had imagined turrets, batteries, banks of guns. What came out of the front of the human ship was simpler than that. 2 long, dark rails. A single round port between them, deep and quiet. Nothing showy, nothing pretty. Just 3 openings in the metal, dark and patient. Bren's voice came over the soft speaker on the wall. She was humming, not nervously, the way a person hums while making breakfast. Targets locked, she said. Distance closing, they are spreading out to flank. Let them, Adira said. Her voice was calm. Order, Bren asked. End it quickly, Adira said. They are children of a violent clan. Most of them did not choose this life. Make it clean. The first Corin ship fired. A bright streak of red plasma flashed across the dark and slammed into the human ship's forward armor. The armor did not break. It did not even glow. The plasma simply spread across the heavy plating like water poured on stone and faded and left a small dark mark. Then the human ship fired back. The 2 long rails on its front lit up white. There was no sound, of course. Space had no sound, but Halen swore he felt it through the floor, a single short pulse from each rail, then a softer wash of light from the round port between them. 3 quiet flashes. In the distance, the 3 Corin corsairs simply ceased to exist. There were no explosions. There were no fireballs. There were only 3 brief sparks of light, like small candles being pinched out between 2 fingers, and then nothing. The whole engagement had taken 90 seconds. Halen could not breathe. For a long time after the engagement, no one on the human ship spoke at all. They simply went back to what they had been doing. Bren stood up from her gun station, stretched her back, and walked off the bridge whistling a soft tune. Petros, the medic, picked up a wrench and went to fix a small rattle in a wall panel that had been bothering him. Yusra, the pilot, set the ship to a slow drift and pulled out a small cloth-bound book. She began to read it. Halen stood in the viewing alcove and watched all of this, and he could not understand any of it. In Concordat tradition, when a ship won a battle, the crew shouted. They embraced. They cried. They poured drinks and toasted the dead, both their own and the enemy's. Even the most disciplined Concordat crews allowed themselves a quiet cheer. The humans did none of these things. They simply went back to their lives, as if a difficult chore had been completed and nothing more. Adira appeared next to Halen. Her face was tired in a new way. The calm was still there, but underneath it now sat something heavier. "Walk with me," she said. She led him through the corridors of the great dark ship. They passed the common room where the sleeping figure still rested in his cradle, undisturbed by anything that had happened. They passed an open hatch where Mercer had ended up squatting next to a human engineer, both of them peering into a fuel manifold and arguing softly about pressure tolerances. They passed Pell, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor with Petros, comparing the contents of their medical kits with the focus of two children comparing toys. Eventually, Adira stopped at a small round door. She opened it and gestured Halen through. It was an observation room. The walls were curved glass. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly. There were two small chairs and a low table. Adira sat. Halen sat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. "You did not celebrate," Halen said at last. "No," Adira said. "You ended 3 ships in 90 seconds. The Koran have been a curse on this region for 50 years. Why did you not even smile?" Adira looked out at the stars. She was quiet for a long time. "Because there were 84 people on those 3 ships," she said softly. "I read the heat signatures before we fired. Most of them were young. A few were very young. They were born into a clan that taught them the only way to live was to take from others. They never had a chance to learn anything else. We did not kill enemies today, Halen. We killed children who never grew up." She turned to him. "That is not something you celebrate. That is something you carry." Halen sat with that for a while. "Why does your species do this?" he asked at last. "Why come out here at all? You have a home. You have peace. You said most humans are happy on quiet worlds. Why send a ship like this into the dark to do work that costs you so much?" Adira folded her hands in her lap. "Because we remember," she said. She let the words rest for a moment. "We remember being small," she said. "We remember being alone on our world before we built the things that protected us. We remember being eaten. We remember watching our children eaten. We remember the long centuries when there was nothing in the dark of our world but teeth and patience." She tapped the arm of her chair gently. "When we finally became strong, we had a choice. We could turn that strength outward and take whatever we wanted. Many of us wanted to. There were hard centuries when we tried. Empires, conquests, fleets. We did terrible things to each other and to ourselves." "What stopped you?" Halen asked. "We did," Adira said simply. "Slowly, painfully, generation after generation, we argued, we bled, we changed our minds. And eventually a quiet majority of us looked around at what we had built and said, this is not who we want to be." She looked back at the stars. "So we put the empires down. We brought the fleets home. We taught our children different stories. And we kept just a few ships like this one, crewed by people who volunteer. Not for glory, not for plunder. Just because we know what it is like to be small and alone in the dark, and we decided that no one else within our reach should ever feel that way." Halen could not speak. There was something rising in his chest, large and hot and difficult, and he did not have a word for it. Adira saw his face. Her own face softened. "Your captain made a mistake today," she said gently. "He took a small science ship into the unknown without protection. The old Halen, the one who came aboard 4 hours ago, would have written a stern report about that. The new Halen, sitting here now, will probably understand why your captain did it." "Curiosity," Halen whispered. "Curiosity," Adira agreed. "It is a thing humans understand very well. It is the same thing that took us off our world. It is the thing that brought us to this dark patch of nothing where your ship happened to be in trouble." She smiled, small and sad. "You are not alone out here, Halen. There are quiet ships in the dark. There always have been. We just do not advertise." Halen looked at her, and at the stars, and he was very glad in a way he had no language for, that he was not alone. 3 weeks later, the council chamber on the Concordat homeworld filled slowly with old officials in long pale robes. The chamber was a wide round room cut from white stone. Tall narrow windows let in the soft gold light of a late afternoon. 7 seats sat in a half circle at the front. each one filled by a senior counselor who had spent decades reading reports about distant places they would never visit. In the center of the floor, on a small raised platform, stood Halen. He had been called home from the survey mission to deliver his report in person. That alone was unusual. Most reports were filed through channels and read by aides. A personal summons from the council meant the matter was either very small and very awkward, or very large and very important. Halen knew which one this was. He had not slept well since the encounter. He had thought about Adira every day. He had thought about Bren's quiet humming. He had thought about the soft voice that said, "End it quickly," the voice of a commander who treated her enemies like grieving children rather than targets. The lead counselor, a tall, thin elder named Voma, raised one wrinkled hand for silence. "Officer Halen," Voma said, "we have read your written report twice. We have reviewed the scans and the battle footage from the quiet drift. We have summoned you because we wish to ask you a question that the report does not answer." Halen bowed his head. "I am here to serve." "The species you encountered," Voma said carefully, "these humans, are they a threat to the Concordat?" The chamber went very quiet. Halen could hear his own breathing. He had expected the question. He had been preparing his answer for 3 weeks. He had drafted it many times in his mind on the long journey home. He had words ready, diplomatic words, careful words. Standing in the chamber, looking up at 7 old faces in white robes, he abandoned all of the careful words. "No," he said. The counselors shifted. They had not expected so simple an answer. "You are certain?" Voma asked. "I am certain." "Officer Halen," another counselor said, a heavy older man named Trell. "We have watched the footage. We have seen what their weapons did to 3 Coran corsairs in 90 seconds. A species that can do that hides ships of that power in deep space, that has technology beyond anything in our records, is a threat by any reasonable definition." Halen turned slowly to face him. "With respect, counselor," he said, "you are using the wrong definition." The room stiffened. "A threat," Halen said, "is something that wants to harm you. The humans do not want to harm us. They could have done so the moment our shuttle docked with their ship. They could have taken our survey vessel. They could have followed us home. They did none of these things. They gave us tea. They saved our lives. They asked nothing in return." He turned back to Voma. "Their commander told me in her own words that her people choose to keep these ships flying for one reason, so that small kind species, far from home and in trouble, do not have to be alone in the dark. That is not the sentence of a threat. That is the sentence of a guardian." Voma was quiet for a moment. "You are saying we should welcome them as friends." "I am saying we already have them as friends," Halen said. "We simply did not know it until now. They have been out here longer than any of us realized. They have been quietly keeping back the worst things in the dark for a long time. Our trade routes have been safer than they should have been. Our outer colonies have lost fewer ships to raiders than the math suggests. I think now I know why." Trell frowned. "That is a great deal to claim from a single encounter." "Yes," Halen said, "but I sat across from her, counselor. I watched her hands shake when she spoke about the 84 young Coran she had to end. A monster does not shake. A conqueror does not grieve. Whatever the humans are, they are not predators dressed up as friends. They are friends who learned, on a very hard world, how to be dangerous when they had to be." The chamber was silent. Voma looked down at his papers for a long time. Then he looked up. "The report will be filed under a new classification," he said quietly. "Not Class III Deathworld. We will create a new category, one reserved for species who could rule the galaxy and have chosen, instead, to look after it from a quiet distance." He paused. "We will also send a formal message of friendship to their home world, through the channels they have offered. And we will begin, slowly, to learn how to be the kind of neighbor such a species deserves." Halen bowed his head deeply. That night, after the chamber had emptied, he stood on the small balcony of his home and looked up at the sky. The stars were thick and bright above his city. He thought about Adira somewhere out there, drifting in her great scarred vessel, sipping a warm drink and watching the same stars from the other side. He thought about how many other quiet ships there might be, all across the dark, crewed by tired, patient people who had decided that strength was something you carried so others could rest. He had spent his whole career thinking the galaxy was a cold place where small species had to be afraid. Tonight, for the first time, he understood that it was not entirely. There were warm hands in the dark. He smiled up at the stars. Then he went inside and slept, and his sleep for once was easy.